So, on the occasion of the International Earth Day, it is my great pleasure to announce this pertinent masterclass with a focus on non-anthropocentric storytelling and cinematography. Corinne van Egeraat and Petr Lom have dedicated 20 years to urgent stories about human rights, but for the last 7 years they have decided to focus on the neglected rights of nature. They found ethnical grounding in the Maori concept of kaupapa, which shapes their vision of filmmaking devoid of ego. In the masterclass, they will present the non-anthropocentric filmmaking and storytelling techniques they apply to tell stories in which human beings are not at the center. And they will show us the evolution of their films like I Am the River Is Me, which was screened at last year's ZagrebDox. This year we are screening Coriolis Effect, and they will also talk about their latest project. So, Corinne and Petr, I give the floor to you, and also they will take questions from you guys from the beginning, so please feel free to comment and join in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're supposed to.
Oh, yeah, you're supposed to use the mic.
Yes. Thank you so much for that gracious introduction.
Oh.
And let's hear from the extra sound recording. Is it supposed to be on top of this?
No, it's okay.
No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So, welcome everybody. Super nice that you're here. It's a pleasure to be here at ZagrebDox. So we thank ZagrebDox for the invitation. And wow, World Earth Day.
Yeah.
It should be every day, no? World Earth Day.
It's kind of a strange day because nobody celebrates it. It's like, oh, okay, next year, whatever. Yeah. But anyway, we're here. Thank you. Is this better? Oh, okay, got it. Maybe we just start. Well, we should introduce ourselves. I guess we're already introduced. We're also a couple who work together for the last 15 years. Who has seen the two films? We want to focus really. We made a whole bunch of films, but we're only going to show clips from two, the last two. Did anyone? See, we have one person in the audience who I recognize from history. Who else has seen the Coriolis Effect except our? Oh, I've got two people. Three? Is that 2.5? Two people. Okay, two's not bad. If you want to see the film, if you like what you see, it's going to be it's part of this online thing in ZagrebDox, so you can stream it. But if you stream it at home, please turn off the lights, wear headphones, and pretend you're in the cinema. It's that kind of film. And then we had a film here last year, I'm the River Is Me. Anybody saw that film in the audience? No, a couple people again. So that was on the platform last year. I don't know if it still is this year. If not, you reach out to us, we can send you the link. So we have, I think, roughly an hour and 10, something like that, to talk together. So let's start. And one thing we can do, because it's so small, and so you're not bored, please ask a question anytime you want. Just don't be shy. It's nicer if it's really a conversation. But the theme is...
It's nice to start.
Yeah.
Because we're so small.
Oh, okay. Nice. Shake it up already.
Yes, because we're so small.
Shake me up.
Could you, each of you, briefly say your name, and then what is your water? So it could be the water you were born next to, or it could be the water that's most important in your life right now. It could be a river, a lake, a sea. Can you do that?
Yeah, and actually the reason why we do it, that's nice, is actually this is how the Maori introduced themselves. And actually, if you didn't know, the first of the two films, I'm the River Is Me, is a Maori story. It takes place in New Zealand, and it's about the Wanganui River, and that's the first river in the world that's recognized by law as a legal person, has rights like you and me. And they introduced themselves like that. So
what is your river?
So my river actually is a couple, because I was born in Prague. It was the Vltava when I was born, and then I grew up in Canada in a little town. It was Willow Creek, a tiny little nothing where I used to fish as a boy. And now I live in Amsterdam, and so it's the I.
Yeah, mine is the inner sea, Schelde, in the Netherlands, in the south of the Netherlands, close to the border with Belgium. It's an inside sea, which means that there is a slip of land between that and the big sea, the North Sea Channel. And then there is the A, where we live together on a houseboat, so we float on our canal.
Nice. Very quickly, yes, please. Sure.
My name is Lana.
Oh, okay.
Hi, my name is Lana, and I have also two rivers. I have River Sava here in Zagreb, and also River Rhine, which goes through Basel, and my brother lives in Basel, so I spend a lot of time there.
Hi, I'm Boris. I would go for the Mrežnica River. There's a city an hour away from here. It has 4 rivers going through it. It's called Karlovac. And the rivers are so slow and so clean. They're infinitely better than the seaside in the summertime. So I go for the Mrežnica River. They have these, they run slow. You can kayak upstream if you want. You can paddle upstream. But they're so green, they're so clean, and they have these fantastic slopes that slow them down, that create these infinite reliefs where you can chill or just explore. So, Mrežnica River for me.
Hello, my name is Sandra, and I think I would like to go to Boris' place and try the rivers. But I love the sea, and my sea is the Baltic Sea in Scandinavia.
Hi, my name is Bruno, River South in Zagreb.
Hello, my name is Luka, and my water is a little stream that was next to my house when I was little here in Zagreb, called Jelenovac.
Hello, my name is Stella, and I'm from the coastal part of Croatia, so I'm connected to the Adriatic Sea.
Hi, I'm Sunčana, and I'm also from the coastal part from Zadar, so Adriatic Sea as well.
Hi, I'm Luka. I have few waters. There is first Adriatic Sea, because I grew up in one small eastern town on the west coast of Istria, but my parents are from eastern and western Slavonia, so there is also river Danube River and river of Sava.
Hi, Katarina, and Adriatic Sea also, because I grew up in Istria. So.
Hi, my name is Lucia, and I have 2 rivers. One is the river Taldara in Bolzano, in the Dolomites, because I lived there for 3 years, and I love walking around the river. And the second one is river Spree in Berlin, because I also lived there, and I also walked next to the river, and I loved spending time there. But I'm originally from Zagreb.
Hi, I'm Vana, and my water is the Adriatic as well, especially around Kornati Islands because I grew up there.
Hi, Ivan, Adriatic Sea.
Hi, my name is Maria. I didn't grow up at the Adriatic Sea, but it's the most beautiful sea in the world, so I would go with that.
Okay, so thank you. Oh, we missed some people. Who did we miss?
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Barbara. I also come from Karlovac, which has 4 rivers. So my river from Karlovac will be Korana, because I grew up there and I swim there over the summer, so that's my favorite river.
I'm Dina. My favorite river is also near Karlovac. It's Dobra.
And you?
I'm Samir, and I'm from Istria, so Adriatic Sea.
Okay.
Also.
And how about you?
Oh, Adriatic Sea, of course.
Yes.
Of
course.
She's Nina.
Okay. Yeah, so that's actually fun to introduce yourself to already to start thinking about what would our world and also stories, already storytelling, look like if our identity was, if this was commonplace to think of yourself in those terms, not as a separate individual, but actually related somehow to the ecosystem in which you live. Well, that would imply for storytelling. So just as a quick introduction, when the masterclass is called this fancy word, right? Non-anthropocentric storytelling. So what does that mean? It can mean a lot of things. It's actually becoming a more trendy academic subject now, and also in some documentary filmmaking. So it's not like we're inventing anything new, but I think that where we're coming to the subject is a little bit different, at least from the films that I can think of in this sort of thing. So some people, you think, and actually it's very funny when I say we're giving this kind of talk, often the first reaction I get is one of humor, like, oh, so does that mean like the turtles are holding the camera, right? Which is also, is kind of a joke, but then it's sort of not, because it becomes kind of more serious, because, well, if you're doing storytelling really in the extreme, it really would mean that human beings are not there at all, right? In the how, or even holding the camera. So, and there's actually are some kind of experiments, people have tried this sort of stuff, as soon as you start looking into it. There's one example, you could look at it on the internet, it's called a guy in the 70s, Michael Snow. It's on YouTube. It's like last forever. This film. It's called La Région Centrale. He's a Canadian, French-Canadian guy, and he had this idea to put a camera, like it's his early 70s, so it's, you know, I don't know what kind of crappy computers operating the camera, but it's just a camera on a hill that moves around in random places and just takes pictures of the landscape. So that would be one way of going at this kind of storytelling, but I don't find that interesting at all, actually. I could care less. Because it mainly, probably because it comes from just it seems to me, an intellectual place, and then I lose interest entirely. And there's similar examples probably, which I like better, but I'm not really that interested in. So, classic example, actually a very strong film, is probably, you know, Kosakovsky's Gunda, right? Film about a pig. We're going to tell the story from the pig's perspective, right? But not really. You're actually only observing the pig. You're never taking it from its perspective. So, and then there was a film this year, I forget the title, short film that was nominated for an Oscar, 4 donkeys wandering around anyone seen this film? Remember the title? They're like, I don't even know where it takes place. It's a bunch of donkeys who are wandering around some observatory where there's like telescopes, and they're like wandering around. It's just a donkey film, supposedly from a perspective of a donkey. And that film again, I find kind of, well, stupid, because I'm not a donkey, and I don't believe that you're going to convince me to feel what it feels to be like a donkey either. So, and then I guess the third example might be also very respected filmmakers. These guys from this, what's it called, this sensory lab at Harvard, the guys who made Leviathan, right? So, and before that, Sweetgrass. Maybe you know. Anyone know this film, Leviathan, too? Yeah. So they basically said that they tossed a bunch of GoPros around a fishing boat, and that's supposed to like give you a feeling that it's like a film where the human beings are kind of separate from it. So again, I find all these are kind of intellectual exercises that kind of leave me cold, because they don't, for me filmmaking, if it's an intellectual exercise, I would have been happier to stay as an academic, which is where I started. So I find, or we actually find, that our filmmaking comes from a much more personal, and I hope deeper place, where we're trying to find out why we're here on Earth at all, and what's the point of all this. So it has a kind of it starts with an ethical kind of questioning and a deeply personal one, and ultimately I don't know, call it what you want, a philosophical one or a spiritual one. It depends which way you're inclined. And in fact, for me, all great cinema worth its name has to have that. It has to kind of point beyond itself. So for me, always the biggest example is, of course, for me, and there's lots of them, but I always go back to Tarkovsky as an example of what spiritual cinema means for me. So, and that basically means that I think is that what does this mean then on the anthropocentric storytelling? It's basically where human beings aren't at the center of everything. They don't disappear, because that's kind of, I'm not really interested in a camera in outer space. But where our place in the world is actually reflected upon how it relates to other things. And for me, it always has to point beyond that, beyond the ego or beyond whatever, to some kind of eternal question and a bigger one. So how did we, so make it more practical, and how does that relate to the work we're doing, and why are we inspired by that? So we've been making human rights films together for a very long time, films about injustice. And then slowly our focus has been shifted to something else, which is what is basically injustice to the planet, right? And then more specifically, exploring what's our relation to things around us, everything that's not tied up to human beings. All sounds abstract, but it's not so much. So it's maybe then it's nice. Any questions on this before? That's kind of the general introduction. But then, any questions on this, or some people think, I love Leviathan. Shut up, you know what you're talking about, or anything. No, any questions or comments? Yeah, that's kind of the thesis. But then it's much more practical. So basically, and this is why it's a fun class for us to do, because we were also working in a very intuitive manner. So we're kind of trying to figure out stuff, maybe, even though we do it a lot in the edit, kind of in retrospect, a little bit, because the motivation is kind of also mysterious and surprising. So how did we get set on this course of this sort of thing? Well, in a weird way by accident, right? We got kind of called to go to New Zealand. Why? And to make this film, we don't even know how it happened. We didn't know anybody there, and indigenous stories are usually very difficult to do. And instead, we arrived in New Zealand, and 2 days later, we're at the chief's office, and we got permission with he chooses a protagonist for us, and off we go. So I think it's easiest to show you, and this is about this river in New Zealand. So, and this is where a lot of the inspiration and motivation for the second film, the film that's playing here, the Coriolis, came from, because the projects overlapped. So I think I can start by showing you, let's show you one clip and then maybe a second one. We can start with clip number 1. And I think it's 4 minutes long. Have a look at that. Just again, the context is, it's about this river. We learned that there's this river received personhood rights. First river in the world recognizes a person just like you and me by law. Well, why and how does that work? And so the Maori believe that this river is their ancestor. That's also why they introduced themselves the way we just did now. What's your water? Because the water is part of you. So, and so we were invited to see him speak to the first character who sang the prayer at the beginning of the clip. He invited us. We made a short film with him, and then while we're filming, he says, "Oh, wouldn't it be nice to make a long film together?" And he says, "Well, there's a First Nations Australian Indigenous elder who was going to come here with his daughter, accompanied by an artist, invited them over. Wouldn't that be nice? When they're going to travel down this river with us, wouldn't it be nice to make a film about that?" We said, "Yeah, great." And then COVID came, and 2 years later, and Corinne raised all the money to do it. We made the film. So we show you the first couple minutes of this film, and just to think about what we're talking about. The theme of the class is how that relates. Yeah.
Welcome home.
E rere kau mai te awa nui mai te kau I maunga ki Tangaroa. Ko au te awa o te awa ko au. We're indivisible, we belong to each other. connection that we have with the mountains is exactly the same as we have with the river. That spiritual connection that you have with what we call our ancestors, our tupuna, which are the mountains and the waters and the land that surrounds us.
Sorry, the clip is shorter than I remembered, so you don't get to meet Ned, the protagonist. You only hear his voice, so sorry. Oops. Any questions from what you watched? Not yet. Okay, then one question for me. Why is the water drop so long?
Say it again?
Why is you see the drop of water, right? Why is it so long? Why does it take so long? I have a friend who has ADHD kind of, but he always comes and sees our films. Even though he says, normally I never see films. And he's like, why did you have to give me 12 drops of water? I would be happy with 2 or 3. I get it. I get it. Why? Yeah.
Okay, so for me it was like so for me it was kind of like a heartbeat.
Okay.
So we can hear a vein of the river. That was my interpretation.
Okay, that's beautiful. Thank you. Sure. But even then, what you can just, I mean, I'm a doctor with a stethoscope. I can go 1, 2, done. Maybe you wouldn't want to go to that doctor because you think, oh, well, maybe you should listen more carefully.
Yeah, okay, so if I go that route, we are engineered to like the sound of the heartbeat because when we were babies, it was only.
Okay.
That's also just my.
Even beautiful. That's really wonderful. I love it. And that's actually, anything else? Anyone else? Yeah.
I was thinking about the rhythm.
Yeah.
Because how the water drops.
Yeah.
If you leave it for a longer time, then you have this feeling of the rhythm better. You can feel it better than if it just in times.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else? This is great already. So, I mean, one way, if you're thinking about if you're going to be telling stories where human beings aren't at the center of attention, then one thing that for sure is going to change is the conception of time, right? The river's not, well, maybe it is in a hurry to get to wherever it wants to go, but maybe it's not. So that's for sure one thing to think about. But beautiful remarks. So this poor Jerome, he's the musician you see here. He only plays with traditional Maori instruments. And when he's doing the sound with the stones, well, there's two beautiful stories. First, he says, with tapping the stones, actually, we decided not to give him a voice in the film. Again, moving away from human-centered, only to have his music speak for himself. But he says he's not playing to nature, but playing with nature around him. And he says that every stone is alive and has a different voice. So we cut that out from the film. It's beautiful. And then when you hear not just tapping, but you hear later in the film he's rubbing the stones together. And he says, you actually hear that in the next clip of that sound, so listen to it. And he says, the Maori believe that this is the sound that we heard in the womb for the very first time. So it's not far from the heartbeat you're talking about. So that's wonderful, thank you. Yeah. So, but why did we do it? When we were editing the film in this way, it was kind of an intuitive process. We tried to, in our storytelling, we think, oh, how could the river become a character in the film? At first, and sometimes we even think main character, except it's kind of incomplete because the main character is also the storyteller, who's our guide, who's Ned, who you will meet. You won't actually meet him again in the second clip. So it's someone else, but it's okay. But so that was kind of the main reason I wanted to show this clip was from the teachings that he gives you. That he says, it's extraordinary, right? Stu says, I feel like I'm home when he's on the river. And that's very common for all the Maori there. So you're at one with the river and it's already returned. So how we introduced ourselves, for them that's really part of who they are. There's no division or separation. The human being isn't separate. So what would that again mean for storytelling? So any comments or questions, or you want to add Corinne something to that? Before we go to the second clip with the Australians with their little clip.
No, maybe a much more simple thing is that because we wanted the river to be a main character.
Yeah.
So that was for us as the main protagonist. So it was the first step was to think about how do you establish a character, and what in the clip what I recognize from that is that we just simply follow the way the river is born. So it comes from the mountain and then it melts and so the drops are also kind of like the first drops that will form eventually the big stream that you see in the end. So that was more like technically for storytelling, how we thought, if we establish it that way, people will start to see it as a living being, and
right.
That was at that time was our decision. And the other one is that because we didn't, and this is done a lot in films. I mean, it's not original, but the reason for us to have the camera in many places, so for example underwater, and keep it there for a while to make you think, so the shot is long enough to make you think, why are we watching from beneath the water up, is that we are trying to create like a bit of a dream reality, where, because in your dreams you can go everywhere. And that is also was something that we were experimenting with, and that's what, and from the air, and out of the water, and on the water, and of course in the course of the film that gets more extreme.
Anyone else? Otherwise, we'll go to clip 2. And before we start, so you're not confused.
Yeah.
This is Brendan and his daughter, who are First Nations Australian Indigenous people, telling us what they think about how we're related to nature.
You sit and listen, you'll hear the country sing. All together. Intertwined, in harmony, in sync.
Clips are all too fast, but that's the nature of the exercise. Any questions for what you watched? Anybody? Okay. So this was basically continue the story's inspiration for the second film. So what we did learn from the Maori above all was this idea that, look, we're not alone as individuals, we're actually connected to everything around us. And that's to all, and that every living thing somehow has its own story, and that everything's connected. And that also means, they also do through time, like you saw in the first clip. So there's also an idea that somehow you share time with even your ancestors, that they're even ever present. So you're not really separated in time from everything around you. And what this also means then is that you have a responsibility. So part of the lesson in this film, as Ned says, the protagonist, is that they see themselves as guardians of nature, of caretakers of everything around them. There's a responsibility, right, to the future. So those are the kind of ideas that we then took to heart and thought, oh, how can we adopt it in the second film we started working on, which is the film that played yesterday, called The Coriolis Effect. Want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I guess that what is maybe nice to say is that, because we call us a non-anthropocentric storytelling, but we're experimenting with that, so it's our way of doing that, right? And I guess that the clip we just saw, that was us growing up in public, because of the indigenous protagonists that we were working with or learning from, is actually a better word, we still put the lessons they taught us inside the film. So basically use their voices to explain a little more, to give us a little bit of tools of how to look, but in a way that was also what we were learning as filmmakers and what we were trying to put into image. And then we said, let's try to do it without that as such.
Yeah,
and that was the choreography.
The next step was, well, okay, show, don't tell. now we're kind of telling you, but we're also showing you a bit, but not in a real, more kind of comprehensive way. So, any questions from that? So, yeah.
Why do you do this? Why do you do this?
Why
do you do this?
Oh, excellent. Why do we do this?
Yeah.
You mean the teaching or the film?
No, why?
Why do we make films?
Why do you try to make non-anthropocentric?
Oh, yeah, wonderful question. Yeah, okay, the article of faith is this one, is that, well, what are we doing with making films and storytelling? So, well, in our tiny little contribution, we're always making films and movies we call them, like this festival, movies that matter, right? Stuff on urgent subjects, because we care and because it takes so long to make a film that it better be somehow worthwhile. So that was easy, making human rights films and personal motivation. Well, I was born in Czechoslovakia before the Russians invaded a couple months, and then we fled to Canada, so that kind of stuff is in my identity, who I am. And then when the planet's becoming a mess, it's kind of like, well, let's expand our horizon and talk about injustice to the planet. So that's why we tell the kind of stories we do. But, so there's this kind of simple faith we have with our little films, and that's that if you could create, give the viewer an opportunity to feel a sense of awe or sense of wonder to the world around us, and experience this kind of, some of the lessons that the Maori talk about, this idea of maybe nature is actually sacred, and that you're not really separate from it, something like that. And maybe that would lead to a transformation in human behavior. So, and that's kind of the faith that guides this kind of filmmaking for us. So, yeah, and then there's a beautiful word to share with you too. It's a Maori word called kaupapa. It was mentioned in the introduction. And that's a Maori word that means, what's your compass? Where does it point to? And like in the most essential, most important way. So, and the Maori do this as an exercise all the time. Like, what are you doing and why? So, you better have a good reason. like a really ethical one, and for them also a real spiritual one. It's like, so, and that brings with it a sense of responsibility, that once you know what your values are and where they should be pointed, you better be consistent with them and follow them through. So, like for example, so we're invited with this film to show it at the COP in Brazil last year, the climate conference. It's like for like a whole week long, a bunch of events with, there's a kind of a parallel event with all the people who are working on rights of nature. There's a big global alliance of these people. It's very exciting. So we said, hey, you know, Ned, and we're invited to this thing, and you know, you guys want to come? And they say, yes, that's our kaupapa. We have to do that, right? So, and it actually started even earlier, is that when we met the chief, it's actually a funny story, I have to say, I love to tell this story. We arrived in New Zealand, we don't know anybody, right? Couple of sort of...
So we had only read about the river in the newspaper, but the funny thing was that I read the article about the first river in the world that was granted personhood rights, and it kind of totally made sense to me. I was like, oh, but that's, of course, makes sense, that nature is its own, that it should have its own rights, also to defend itself from polluters or anything. And I told to Peter that I think we should go to New Zealand because we have to go to this river, but it's on the other side of the world. So, so we talked about it, and it's as if by talking about it, we can. It's a very strange story because it kind of manifested itself. Because a week later, an editor from Dutch television asked us, "Don't you guys have a nice story? Can be anywhere in the world?" Because I'm looking for a short documentary to complete my a series, a slot of documentaries. So I said this, and he said, "Oh, fantastic! I will give you some money, and for sure you can buy a plane ticket from it, and just go." So that was weird. And then follows this story.
Then we get to New Zealand, and we end up in the chief's office like second day we're there, through also a funny coincidence. You know, someone in Australia worked with in Myanmar, who had a roommate in New Zealand, who happens to live along the river, whose parents happen to work with the chief for many years. So we meet the parents, they like us, we get introduced to the chief the next day. We come into his office, bang, he looks at me, I never had a test like that. You could feel it, oh geez, never felt this before. Someone just looked through me, into me and through me, and just did a test in the flash of an eye, starts to laugh, says, "Come on, and how can I help you?" So we tell him the pitch. And he says, "Only one person can help you," and that's Ned, the protagonist, calls him up and says, "Ned, help these people." Again, Ned has to do that because it's his duty. In a simple way, because the chief told me to do, and I follow whatever the chief says we do. But then it transforms into, oh, okay, the river is the most important thing in his life, so anything to do with the river, he does. It's his duty. So, long story short, that's what inspires us to make these kind of films. So, you know, our small little contribution to living a happy life. So that's what, yeah.
But also, I think that in this horrible time, where there's only bad news almost, so we really like to do this topic, rights of nature, because rights of nature, it is the fastest growing legal movement in the world. So there's a lot of people now connecting to this, and we really like to be connected to that, because it's something that is a more positive subject, and it can be contribution to something that actually could save a part of the planet instead of destroy it. So if you, that's an even bigger reason, I think. But of course we are storytellers and filmmakers, so you want to make a cinematic experience, which cinema is, it's just magic sometimes, so that's...
And of course the bigger reason is that we love making films and love cinema, but it's like, well, that's a big playground, so which part of the playground are you going to choose to play with? So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So long, Jesus. So the film, so the next part of the class or whatever is, I have how many clips here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 clips from the next film. And that's more an exploration of, okay, so you have these ideas, how do you translate that into storytelling or the form, and what implications does it have from what we just mentioned here? So we can start with that. So give you just the summary, and you can stream the film if you like to see what you saw. I don't know how the streaming thing works with ZagrebDox, but it's there. The Coriolis effect. First of all, it's a bad title for a film. It's really funny. We showed it in One World in Prague, and they're like, doesn't really translate into Czech. Do you mind if we just call it the Eye of the Hurricane? We're like, no problem. But the Coriolis effect, why we like the title, why we call it that. The Coriolis effect is just the fact that because of the Earth's rotation, large moving objects don't move in a straight line because they're deflected by the spinning of the Earth, so they go off axis. And that's one of the explanations for how hurricanes are born. And because of a whole bunch of reasons, Cape Verde happens to be the place where hurricanes are born. So we learned that as storytellers, and that was like, wow, that's a fantastic metaphor for what's happening to all of us, that our planet is spinning out of control. So we decided to make a film there exploring this subject. So, and inspired by our way of this, is like, well, how do we tell stories where it's not all about us? So we tried to tell a whole bunch of different stories, kind of like a big mosaic of different smaller stories that are also stories about animals, and they're just as important as the stories you see about the people. So that was kind of the form I wanted to experiment with. And then, of course, it's all in the telling. How do you get across some of these ideas that we just mentioned? That maybe actually you aren't separate. That maybe actually everything is interconnected. I mean, in a way, it also comes to kind of, you might say, basically the urge that a lot of people, I would think kind of all people have, is to kind of, you might say, for enlightenment or waking up, which people say is actually, once you pierce this veil of illusion, you realize that actually everything is one. And that's not so far from the Maori beliefs. And in a way, it's why the first film was also commissioned by the Buddhist broadcaster in the Netherlands, because they saw those parallels. So that's also what we're trying to do with the storytelling. Even though we don't pretend to have woken up, we'd love to, but you know, it's kind of the dream for most people. But it's in a way still trying to explore what those things could be like. So we'll show you the first clip. We're going to go to clip 3, and that's, I think, just, I wanted to give an example of, above all, I think in this, we've found it useful in thinking about this technique, how it's interesting and wonderful to shift perspectives in unexpected ways. So I will show you it's almost from the very beginning of the film. It starts a little bit into it. The film starts with the breathing of the earth, but it takes about 10 minutes, so we don't have time for that. How about that? Human time, we're in a hurry. So we'll start, and it's, I think, another 4 minutes. So we can show you, please, clip number 3, and if you could go a tiny still bit up with the volume for this one, would be great.
Yeah, I'm, in trying to pass on an idea or a suggestion about a different point of view.
Yeah.
We filmmakers had several options. Like one of them is try to explain things, which sounds a bit patronizing. One of them is to trust the audience, which is a little bit too optimistic and it rarely works. And for me, I find the most effective way, and I'm curious to hear your comment about it, is to tell stories and to pass on messages through anecdotes. And it's the same with kind of family heritage. You try to tell the story of a family and like, or your own family or any family. Like if it's just names, numbers, or stats, or socio-political, cultural context, it's just too dry. But whenever there's a juicy anecdote, whenever there's a real life anecdote that people can relate on an everyday basis, then it kind of hits. So I'm wondering if this type of approach could benefit from anecdotization, of connecting the ideas that you very nobly try to pass on, to make them more digestible and kind of graspable through a series of anecdotes connected to little everyday moment, like flushing the toilet and whatever the metaphors can come out there. I was wondering whether you were thinking of kind of reducing these grand scale of nature to mundane everyday activities to which people could have kind of,
Sure.
more likely epiphanies.
Yeah, you have to see the film indeed. I mean, there's a film, I haven't seen it yet, but what I've read about the synopsis, this film Trillium by Kosakowski, which sounds like it wants to continue this introduction for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet, but they say it's just a person walking back and forth for a long time. In fact, and some people experiment in those terms. I was ChatGPT, I was saying, non-anthropocentric filmmaking example. And they mentioned a film that I saw 15 years ago in Berlin. It's by an American experimental filmmaker, Sharon Lockhart. Anybody ever heard of her? It's a film called Double Tide. And there's a tide that comes in twice somewhere on the East Coast. And you watch for 90 minutes a lady who's picking up, I don't know if they are oysters or mussels, twice, because there's two tides. They come in and out, and she does it again. And you're like, it's like worse than going to the dentist. But it's kind of like, oh, can I have some anesthesia here, please? But some people like that, and it can turn into this meditative sort of thing. But that's not, I won't give you a turtle like this for 2 hours. It's not my thing. It's like, that's next. So, and goes, yeah. So, in fact, that's how the film is set up. It's set up with small little stories that are woven together, and that's why the editing took so long and why it was so fun, and why we filmed so many hundreds of hours. But yeah, so here's an anecdote about it, if you like to use that word. We prefer to use a fancy word. We're thinking more of parables, because we're trying to do something more biblical, bigger. but it's the same, really. And in fact, the Bible is just made up a bunch of anecdotes, right? So, yeah, so let's look at clip number 4, and then we can talk about what's the most effective way to tell anecdotes about nature, and why we think maybe these anecdotes are a little different than what you'd watch in a David Attenborough film. Yeah? Clip 4, please. Thank you. comment.
Was dat een anekdote?
Is that an anecdote?
Yeah.
That was relatable.
Yeah.
And the film's all about survival. Okay, so there's human stories about survival. And maybe if there's no, to give you more of a taste for the film, let's show you, because that's just one shot, so that's one approach. And indeed, part of it, I think, is to make sure it's one shot, that you don't cut the action. So there's another approach. It was really before I came. Some people would suggest, not my thing, could be fun though. They say, well, part of, if you want to get away from human-centered storytelling, is to even think more about the form. We always want to have this narrative arc of building tension, start with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But then the question is, well, if that's the human expectation, then if you'd like to do something different, then actually you would want to chop the action continuously, so you don't never get a resolution. Tease people like that or make you rethink that. But that's not our thing. So let me jump ahead then and show you clip. Well, we could actually, yeah, let's show clip 6 first. Questions, comments? Okay, so to go back up a step to the first shot I showed you of the breathing coming down to the turtle. Part of that was just that's part of the introduction. So that's where you're trying also to give the keys to the film. It was like, what kind of film is this? What's the language going to be? And what we really like there is this idea of changing perspectives. You don't know what you're looking at, and you're very close. And then what's very close all of a sudden also turns to very far. And that's part of ways of experimenting at this idea of that things are maybe more interconnected than you think. You don't know really where you are and if you're in the macro world or looking at the world from a tremendous distance. Apart from the fact that there's no talking in the first 15 minutes of the film. Language isn't important. That's not a way to get to the essential. So, any questions about these last two clips that we watched? Okay, we're going to rush ahead because we got 10 minutes left. But basically, so it's this kind of juxtaposition and also the element of time having very long shots that we think is a way as storytellers or craftsmen of creating us this sense of awe to what's happening to us or to experience the natural world around you. The feeling you're supposed to get, or if you have the opportunity to look up at the stars at night, even though less and less people are actually practically able to do that because of light pollution. So that's, in a simple way, what we're trying to do, okay? Now it leads, in this kind of storytelling, I want to show, we have enough time I think for two more clips, and one of them I'll show you this is a clip from we can show clip 5 with the turtle. Talk about the question that came up after we showed this, which is fun. Then if you start to really take this kind of storytelling seriously, what are the kind of questions that can come up? So I'll tell you the question after you watch the clip. If we could watch clip number 5, please. So another anecdote. But the question that came up after, it's actually fascinating, after a Q&A showing this film, someone asked us, well, I'm watching this film and it's supposed to take, this kind of storytelling seriously, so, did you get the consent of the turtle to film it in such an intimate moment when it's, giving birth? So we thought, my initial reaction was also to laugh. But actually then you start to reflect and think, oh, it's kind of a serious question. So, what do you do with that? There, I'm not really sure. We got an even better one with the river film, because you see the dog at the very beginning of the clip, that's Ned's dog. And then someone pointed out, well, you didn't give him a credit because you get these title cards to introduce the characters. And indeed, that was beautiful. It's like, oh, you're right. We forgot. We only credited Jimmy the dog at the end, but we didn't introduce him as a character, which with this kind of storytelling you should, if everybody's equal or equally important, of course, sure, yeah. I think, actually, we still have a little bit of time. So I think we have time only for one more thought. Unless there's more questions. And maybe then I should just, what do you want to show them Vasco, or have them just listen to Vasco? Maybe it's nicer to show if you haven't seen the film. There's one, and that came up also at a Q&A recently now with the film. Someone said, oh, well, with this kind of storytelling, like in the history of cinema, are you inspired by films like, I can never pronounce it, right? Kojima, right, that film. And then a bunch of ones that follow that, but particularly that one. And there I kind of said, well, not really. But then I kind of reflected and I think actually it's a very good example of this kind of storytelling. Because certainly the theme that film, who hasn't seen that film, Kojima? Everybody seen it? Everybody knows it?
I haven't.
Oh yeah, look it up, it's beautiful. It's from '82, yeah? And it's a film that also wants to, it's anecdotal, just a bunch of little chapters, there's no talking. But it's a film exploring how our world is out of balance. That's kind of the spiritual message, things are out of balance. So for sure that's an inspiration, but it's interesting actually that film uses the music of Philip Glass. So the music is fundamental to driving the film along. But what's most interesting thing about that is that the composer we worked with, Vasco, who's central to the film, can't stand minimal music. He hates it. And he says, it's fun to listen to, he says, he says he really doesn't like minimal music because it's too restricting and dogmatic and shoving stuff into a form, right? And he says nature is not like that. It's much bigger and expansive and full of variety. So, and part of this storytelling has also been inspired by Vasco the composer, who was and he's also the poet in the film, he's always exploring how his music is inspired by nature. So in a way, he's not so different from the Maori composer you saw at the beginning of the film. In fact, in the form we try to put both of them into the film themselves, so you see them composing the music inside the film as the film moves along. So they're not so different that they're really reflecting on how music can be in harmony or reflect nature itself. So part of this storytelling then for us is also fundamentally then inspired by music. So we can just maybe, I think we're running out of time, show you Vasco in clip number 7. Probably end with that, yeah. fast forward. Any questions? So that's part of the kind of something, and it's part of the forum also then to use his music to get across these kinds of feelings of interconnection. Yeah. Yeah.
But also more in general, if you have any other questions, it doesn't only have to be about this topic, maybe.
Yeah.
Between the two of you, who has the final cut?
Who has the final cut? We usually have an arm wrestle and see who wins, right? 50-yard dash, Corinne. No, that's a nice question. We're a couple, we're a filmmaking couple, and I think the reason why we're able to work together is that it doesn't come up. We really never had an aesthetic disagreement in any of the films we've made so far. We have disagreements. Funny enough is that we don't like the same kind of films often, but when we're working on our own film, we just don't disagree when it comes to forming or shaping it. So I don't know why, it's kind of magical actually, but I think that's the only reason why we can work together. Because if it was, I like strawberry, no, I like chocolate, well, sorry, we'll make your own film, I'll make mine. Which often happens with couples that we meet who will kill each other because of those kind of disagreements that don't work together again. Yeah.
But I don't think we would ever want to work for a producer who would have final cut.
Yeah.
That's maybe the answer, because we do want to have the final cut.
Yeah.
And me producing the films facilitates that anyway, you know? So, we'll be very different. We have something very different to bring to the table. So, we will write together, but I will do more writing than Peter. He does the camera, I'm not technical at all, so.
And our backgrounds are very different. When I started out, I was doing pure cinema, human rights cinema verite. Like in my first two films, the notion of music was like, I'm only using music if I hear it somewhere. Maybe a traditional folk song if someone sang it in my presence. That's it. Otherwise, music, oh my God, why would I want to manipulate the audience like that? And Corinne came from an experimental theatrical background in filmmaking, and these things kind of somewhere met in the middle along the way. So, but yeah. Anyone else? Please, yes.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a question or just what I've been thinking, just listening to you, but I was wondering if there is, if you have been thinking about it, or maybe there is some literature on it, since the whole this movement to move away from the anthropocentric cinema, do we maybe require a different meta-discourse? Like, do we even, is it even possible to talk about characters or about dramaturgy in a classical way if we're just trying to move away from all this stuff in a way where you have a classical hero or a protagonist or something like that?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. In a big, huge arena, right? I mean, one thing also that's kind of trendy too, I think, particularly in academic discourse, is this post-human stuff. What's it like if there's no people around anymore? And I think I haven't seen the film yet either, but I'm going to go see it tomorrow at 9 by this Austrian guy. I would mispronounce his name. Gerhalter, yeah? It's called Melting. Go check that out, because he explores in some of his earlier films this sort of thing. He's like, here's my film where there's nobody around anymore. You've all died.
Almost love this.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Right. So, but, and it kind of, particularly in that film, I don't think there really is a narrative arc anymore either. So, but that's a very big question to ask, because cinema still is something linear. Unfortunately, like, time passes, right? You can't, how do you get around that, right? And you still, I mean, in this film that we've showed you, the Coriolis effect, we're kind of exploring that, so we give you anecdotes in different ways, even though we don't call them that, but still, we do have a narrative arc. It's very simple, but at the beginning, you learn that it hasn't rained for 5 years, and at the end, there's a pilgrimage that it might rain, and it kind of seems to work, and then it actually rains in the film. So and that helps in the storytelling. But in a way, if you would push this further, you'd think, well, you folks should kind of get rid of all of that, actually. And actually, if everything is interconnected and if everything, like the Maori composer says, has a story and its own meaning, then it should actually be fascinating and beautiful to watch a water drop just for 2 hours. And you'd be like so mesmerized in it that you're just lost in it. And it's like, wow, wasn't that amazing? And you wouldn't want to leave. But we're still human beings, so that's probably not going to be so successful or get to what you're trying to do.
You should go to the cinema for it.
Right. But that's why I started the discussion saying is that we're interested in this subject for deeply personal, moral, or spiritual reasons. And that's what drives us to figure out, how can we tell these kinds of stories? I think if you would start it from the other end in a much more intellectual way, that you would come to radically more different, maybe more experimental conclusions. But I think the danger with that is that they will be kind of arid and so dry that you're kind of going to be, you're really going to be lost in the woods, I would think. That's kind of my primitive, intuitive feeling about it. So, but it's a huge area of, a big thing. But basically, the short answer on it is that we're trying to make films like this to make people more open-hearted in a way, to address some of the real issues that we're all facing as human beings before we fall off that cliff. That's kind of our faith, tiny little faith. Yeah.
But we hope to be seeing many variations.
Yeah, and actually, and it's why it's also fun for us to have this sort of conversations, because now we're making a new film that's pushing this stuff even further, because now we're making a film about rights of nature in Europe. There's a lagoon in Spain, the Mar Menor. I don't think most people haven't heard of it, but it's actually the biggest saltwater lagoon in Europe, near Alicante. And inspired by this river, it got legal personhood according to Spanish law 2 years ago. And that's now only worked its way out through the appeals processes. So we're following a court case of how the lagoon can sue its polluters. But we want to do the storytelling where the lagoon is the main character, or the whole ecosystem is the main protagonist. And we still haven't figured out really how to do that, because you want the ecosystem to be the main character and feel how everything is connected to it, but at the same time you are also populating that ecosystem with these people who are trying to do stuff.
Well, they're part of the ecosystem.
And they're also part of the ecosystem. So we haven't figured out how to do that. That's the next experiment. Yeah.
Do you have?
Are we out of time? We have to get out.
Do you have any materials maybe you can show us?
No, we don't have them ready. Do we have more time? You want to watch some more clips, or we should leave?
Just that we have something short.
Oh, I don't have anything. We haven't queued it up from the new thing. That's too hard to do.
We've been, just to say something about it, maybe it's also nice to say a little bit about something else we do, which is we do a lot of impact strategy with this now. So to help this whole rights of nature movement. And actually the next film about Mar Menor is something that was basically born in a Q&A, because we were getting so many questions when we did the river film about, but how about my river? Like the Rhine came up, like how about the Rhine? It's polluted, and how that doesn't compare to this idyllic, beautiful environment in New Zealand. And then we said, that is in a way also the other side of the spectrum. Is like when the water is so polluted that it's dying, how can it stand up for itself? And that's what's happening in Spain. So we've been following that now for 2 years, but we don't have any visual material yet. I mean, we have been shooting a lot, but it's too early to show something. Also because we haven't really resolved the storytelling yet, but we're close, and the court cases are starting. So
great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. If you want to learn, I guess this last thing, if you want to learn more about what we do, look at our website, which is zindoc.nl. That's probably it.
Yeah, we also publish a newsletter, so then you can follow when there will be something to see about this new film. thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for coming.
Yes, thanks for coming.